Welcome to Biodesign Now, a podcast exploring the intersection of design, technology, art, and biology. I'm Kirsten Tingle, an artist and biodesigner, and this is my co-host, biodesigner Akir Hall. And we're joined today by Digby Usher.
Hello.
Digby is an interactive designer and biodesigner who specializes in community co-design and service design. He is currently focused on Lifefabs, a community biofabrication studio operating at the intersection of biodesign, healthcare, nature, technology, and society. The collaborative collab space provides creative scientists and communities access to research facilities while facilitating organic exchanges of knowledge and ideas. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Not at all. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for having us in your wonderful space.
Yes.
Yeah, with quick adaptation, move things around, and
Yeah. So let's jump right into our quick fire questions. So the first one is, what is the best organism that you've ever worked with?
I'm going to be biased here, but it's definitely milk. I know all my projects or have a sort of element around that, but it's just such a versatile material. I mean, sort of the properties of how it can be sort of separated is it is also a living medium as well. Milk would be my answer.
Yeah, it's interesting because in biodesign we have this joke where you have team fungi, team bacteria, team algae, but you have your own team. Milk.
No one has.
It's
team
just
milk.
you on Team Milk.
Yeah, everyone asks why not? Yeah,
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out.
We'll find out
Spoilers.
later.
Sorry.
Okay, so what is the worst organism that you've ever collaborated with?
Ooh, probably. It's probably a bit biased, but houseplants.
Oh.
Yeah, like everything in the
Kill a lot of them.
Yeah, kill a lot of them. Yeah, everything in the lab has been all right so far, but it's as soon as I sort of not take something out of the lab, but have something in my care.
Yeah, I think that will be very relatable for actually a lot of
Yes.
biodesigners, which is a secret.
We're very good with bacteria and very horrible with macroorganisms.
Yeah, everyone's like, wait, aren't you a biodesigner? Why were your plants dead?
This is targeted, but anyway. So what in nature is inspiring you right now?
Probably, I'm going to go with the fungi currently in the sort of surrounding area around Chernobyl that is cleaning up the radioactive waste. I love the way that, especially in synthetic biology, how we sort of engineer organisms to adapt or sort of clean up the planet or sort of help people in the sort of One Health solutions, but actually nature does it automatically. Nature already has these sort of mechanisms built in that we can they're already there.
Ooh, very cool.
Yeah, that's a nice one. So what is your biggest biodesign pet peeve?
As someone who manages a lab, or just someone that as a researcher?
You can choose which one you want to go with.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to name any names, so I'll go with my own. Pet peeve is poor labeling is my yeah, not knowing what's what in a fridge. Yeah, that's my pet peeve.
I feel like that's probably not a great experience.
Yeah, that's also, I'm probably guilty of that
Yeah.
as well, handwriting wise. It's, people
I think key context for this is also that a biodesign fridge in a biodesign lab is full to the brim of weird plates with different bacteria and bags of living organisms and mysterious ice cubes.
Yeah, and I mean, even just special sort of telling the difference between different plasmids. I mean, you've got to just. Often the fridge is they have a slightly pungent smell at times. You don't want to open the door for too long. It's sort of okay. Yeah. So probably labeling is my key pet peeve.
Okay, on to one of our first medium-sized questions. What is biodesign to you?
I see biodesign as this. This sort of stemmed from my interaction design background. I sort of saw interaction design not just purely as how we interact with technology, but how we interact sort of socially, and then that element sort of fed into the sort of biosocial, right? And sort of whether that's around disease and epidemics, or sort of on sort of there's this, and this definitely prevalent in biodesign. There's a sort of scaling element where you're sort of focusing on both the macro of how these sort of systems perspective, and that probably is linked to sort of policy design and service design work I've done, and then all the way down to the micro where you have these really, really tiny organisms interacting and how it's all connected. So that's that journey for me around that, and I really see biodesign encompassing all of that and using that in a positive way in whatever shape, or creative shape that is. Yeah.
Interesting. So more on the sort of big systems all the way down to these micro systems.
Yeah, and almost seeing the sort of interdependencies, sort of relationships between parts that we often just take for granted or ignore. We often just see things in isolation. And I think this also links to sort of having a space like Lifefabs that is an interdisciplinary research space, is actually not being sort of siloed in one sort of practice or one sort of focus area. Actually, how do you connect that to wider systems or wider projects or other people?
I think that is like definitely one of the most important things about biodesign philosophy, is kind of breaking free from categories and disciplines and thinking, in terms of systems and how things interlink, because of course everything is interlinked. And in certain design education and in certain science education as well, like you can very quickly become so specialized that you forget about the ways in which you're connected to other fields, and how bringing those things together can actually be, where the gold is, which is why we're all here.
Yeah, it's like those synergies between people and like disciplines and things, right? Like, I think gone are the age of sort of focusing down on sort of this sort of narrowing fields where actually there's this, you've got to be quite agile, I think, as a biodesigner. And that is why it's also such an awesome and sort of emerging field in this way.
Yeah, one, I think for biodesigners, in terms of the skill set you need, like it is this fascinating mix of like sort of social lock picking, like being able to come to a brand new place and learn all about it really quickly, and then this like real like willingness to learn and this sort of kindness. And
I think there's this sort of, you've got to be quite happy to be uncomfortable. I mean, I was speaking from my own sort of, like, a lot of us wouldn't call ourselves scientists, right? Like, it's sort of, and scientists definitely wouldn't call us. They'd call us artists or designers for sure. But I think there is this sort of agnostic space that you have to be quite uncomfortable with, this sort of, and even whether that's applying for jobs or whatever, like, or a research practice, actually, where do you lie? Like, how sort of, you almost got different feet in different sort of territories there.
But I think so many biodesigners have this like insatiable curiosity, which makes the uncomfortable space of not knowing what you're doing or not knowing the space that you're in fun, because it's it's feeding you, right, and it's always inspiring.
Yeah, projects and life would be really boring if you knew what you were doing next. Yeah. I think there's that element of, even in the lab, where you're changing parameters, whether that's around a living organism or sort of whatever you're working out. There's this sort of constant sort of iterating and not sort of changing elements to like work out the unknown, right? Like it's a journey in that way.
Okay, going way
All the way back.
All the way back, yeah.
So you grew up in London, is that correct? What was your early sort of relationship with nature like, especially being in such a big city?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up sort of down the road from Lifefabs, right? So like King's Cross 20 years ago in Somerstown wasn't what it is now. Like even 25, nearly 30 years ago, it was like a different. And I'd say that there's almost this. I'm definitely a city person, and there's this almost. The first thing that jumps to mind, sort of, my relationship with nature as a child was actually probably Camley's Nature Reserve. And it was like a primary school trip spot. Like my mum used to take me there, but it's like we'd go pond fishing, right?
Yeah.
And like counting like the number of water boatmen you've got there, or like looking for hedgehogs that I'd never ever saw, right? But you knew they were there because there was a hedgehog home or whatever, and foxes. But I would say there were almost these sort of pockets that almost feel like little havens that are so precious, like Camley's in that way. Because the rest of it, you're just in this sort of like concrete jungle, right? Like you don't, there's nothing, besides pigeons.
So would you say London has a lot of green spaces? How do you feel about that?
I think it does as a city, right? But I mean, we're incredibly lucky to have so much green space compared to other cities that don't. I mean, the sort of green space is sort of competition to sort of housing and whatnot. I think there is this crazy element about like who can access it, right? Like if you have, I mean, you see all these private squares in London now, or like gardens that are tied to huge houses, but actually like if you look from above, London is an incredibly green city, but actually how fairly is that greenery distributed, and I think there's an element of actually how many people locally know about Camley Nature Reserve, right? Unless you go with a school, or like often there's still barriers there.
Yeah, so you need certain gatekeepers to give you access to those spaces.
Yeah.
But the green squares thing is so true. I feel like there have been so many times where like you see one of those squares and you're like, oh, amazing, I get to go sit and eat lunch in like a park now that I didn't know existed. And then it's like a locked gate.
Yeah. Or with like a perfectly trimmed lawn, right? Where like it's like a desert. It's
Okay, so kind of moving forward to when you discovered design. I mean, you have such a broad background of disciplines. So, of course, biodesign, interaction design, service design, design for policy. Were those the things and the disciplines and the fields of design that you were interested in, like as a teenager or going to university for the first time?
So, actually, sort of probably going right back to the beginning, pre-uni. It's a weird thing where perhaps I've come slightly full circle in that way, where I used to want to be almost like a sports material designer, right? So like,
Interesting.
I always was fascinated with like the carbon fiber bicycles, in sort of for the Olympics and whatnot. And I was like, okay, one day I want to sort of learn about the sort of the microscopic world around that and how to design and make one of those. That's London for you. And so that moved into sort of the product design element. But I mean, there's also many. I mean, I was more interested in actually how we interact socially, both with objects and systems, and then that led into the sort of biosocial element, and then sort of probably fed back into the materials. So there is an element of sort of iteration of almost nearly a full circle. But
And the two scales as well, like the social and societal scale, and how that interacts with something on a molecular level, like a material. Yeah, so that kind of continuum.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
being very cognizant of both of those ends, so it seems to have always been part of your practice and your interest.
Yeah, definitely. And I think grounding it and grounding projects is key, and context. And I think this is that element that links to sort of co-design or participatory design, or even sort of design ethnography. Whether you're a biodesigner and you're coming up with a project, whether a diagnostic or something that's sort of, if it's not embedded in sort of research with other people, it's again, actually, okay, it sits in a gallery, but actually, how do you step beyond that, and how do you actually engage people, whether it's around futures or think about, okay, actually, how do systems need to be redesigned about this, or actually think about the next steps about, okay, is this actually implementable, or can we actually take this forward in a certain way?
So what did you study first in university?
So interaction design. Yeah.
How would you define interaction design?
So, okay, I would say interaction design is a way of relating to the world and to other people, and that encompasses the sort of interactions with objects and technology. And by technology, I'm not just talking about iPads. I'm talking about like the click of a pen, right? It's sort of it's media agnostic in that way. And what's so great about that journey was almost you have to understand sort of older technologies before you can sort of come up with new ones or think about that. And it definitely links to service design, right? Because there's this element of thinking about, okay, these sort of, again, micro interactions of the everyday and how they link to wider systems and how they have knock-on effects and vice versa. And yeah.
So you're at university, you're studying design, and I believe this is the time where you come across milk.
Yeah, this is the time I come across milk.
Tell us how it all started with milk.
So I feel like I'm about to. Okay, we had this project brief on my interaction design course where we get given. It's called Design Dominoes.
Mm-hmm.
You get given a word a week, and you have to come up with a project. And mine was that week milk. And sort of just by sort of play and exploration, I was like, okay, what happens if I heat it or sort of start separating it and sort of thinking about cheese making, and then that fed into sort of this thing about, I sort of think about, I've actually got this really hard material, can I shape it in certain ways? And I thought, wow, it's similar to bone. Can we make prosthetics from this? Or sort of, sorry. So it's quite similar to bone in that way, and can we actually think about, okay, can this be molded into sort of, okay, what do we sort of think about when we think about sort of prosthetics and orthotics around this, casts, and from that, it was very sort of material. It was a sort of very material exploration, but actually, that linked to the sort of biodesign element of thinking, wow, it's also this living medium too. Mm-hmm. Just like with cheese making, with different cultures, you can shape different flavors. Can you actually shape the materiality of it in that way? And yeah, that was that sort of transition there.
Mm-hmm. So how do you give milk the same properties as bone? How does that process work?
It's sort of, it is part of that cheese making process, right? You're separating the curds and whey, you're focusing on the casein protein, and you're almost trying to create a matrix that is sort of stronger and sort of binds in that way. And there's also this weird thing where my grandmother, again from childhood, I think the connection there was like when I was a kid, it was like you have to have your glass of milk a day, right? Because you can't break a bone, like. You want to grow up and be strong or whatever.
The good milk lobby.
Right, yeah, it was like, yeah, like...
It's always been a part of you.
Yeah, it was like this thing that she obviously grew up with since sort of post-war probably, sort of throughout, and it was thrown at her. And then every time I was there, it was like, here you go. It's like, yeah, so it was this like, my grandmother was like the face of a sort of UK Got Milk campaign in the household, right? There was like a... so that was also probably this subconscious connection with like this material in that way to connect those dots.
So like the social engineering of milk in our lives in Britain, all the way right down to the materiality of milk.
Well, I should probably go and actually visit her and thank her, or also say, it worked. Whatever you're doing,
So was your graduate project also based on milk?
So that was my that was my sort of final outcome at the end of sort of my BA. And I thought, actually, I'd love to get into more of the science around this and sort of think about, okay, symbio and engineering elements and thinking of this as a living medium. And that's that sort of biodesign jump to, where we are now.
So biodesign elements were consistently present when you were studying. So were your, everyone else on the course, were they like familiar with you working with like a living organic medium? Was that something that was normal?
So on the interaction design course, not really. I mean, everyone was doing these sort of interactive installations, whether that's sort of projection mapping, touch designer, sort of more physical computing, robotics, and suddenly this guy in the corner is sort of sitting down with jugs of milk. Like, that's smelling the rim out slightly, right? Like it was a new thing there. But again, with biodesign, whatever you're designing, whether that's sort of interactive sort of exhibits or robotics, there's always like life there, right? There's sort of, whether that's bacteria or, I mean, even we sort of had that. It's now more prevalent post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But there is this invisible world of sort of microlands that's all around us and on things, and that we can almost play with and work with. If you think about, like, I suppose my field now around interaction design is we always focus on physical computing and programming through semiconductors or sort of Arduino boards. But rethinking sort of actuators as materials, right? We can use living materials now to sort of self-assemble. There's this element of sort of active matter that MIT coined a few years ago. But like, there's this thing of actually why we sort of making all these silicon chips that can, or devices that can sort of fold or move in certain ways or respond, when actually these materials they're already doing that, and we can program them. So we can sort of have this sort of programmable element in materials. So that's also that linkage between biodesign and interaction design. That is my jam.
Also programming living materials that already have the like active element in them.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way where a window swells in winter, right? Like it's a nightmare to open, your room gets steamy. In theory, that wood, it's not living, but it has living properties, or sort of the tissue fibre from that wood has absorbed moisture in a certain way, and it's changed shape. It's a nightmare to open, but actually, okay, we have this property that can change in different conditions. Can you actually think about, okay, what happens if we've got a thin layer and I keep it in certain conditions? How does that affect certain elements?
It's like the dynamism of a living material post its livingness.
Yeah, that wood example is really boring, but
But I think it also holds true to actually quite a lot of biomaterials. Like, say, for example, with mycelium, like after you dehydrate it, you have this sort of, once living material that is going to have these same interactive living properties.
I mean, my one criticism of biodesign in the way we think is we jump to like designing biomaterials, and then we start fitting these really, really dynamic materials in these really static objects, right? Be like, oh, that'd be a great brick, right? That'd be great. We can replace concrete with that. And you're like, yeah, the problem with concrete, and we put it under the same like material property tests, which we still need to do, don't get me wrong, otherwise we have buildings that collapse. But we put them under the same like regulations as a standard like sort of traditional material, when it actually has all these other great properties that we can enhance and sort of think about and sort of work with.
So they require kind of new ways of thinking about materials in order to get the best out of them and to understand what they can really give us.
Yeah, it's almost like we put it in a box, right? Like it's like, yeah, everyone jumps to like soundproofing.
Yeah.
I've heard your rant about the unending amount of biomaterial soundproofing blocks.
No, I've got nothing wrong with soundproofing projects.
Okay. AV biomarkers? Avipathogen biomarkers?
Yeah, it was to do with, as in birds. Yeah. It was specifically to do with poultry, right? Because, I mean, we sort of always, the sort of battle that we always have with sort of antibiotics that's sort of rampant and overused, and we sort of throw them down the toilet inappropriately and they contaminate systems. And again, that comes down to the sort of policy and systems perspective. Campylobacter is, I mean, it's, I think, the second biggest foodborne gastrointestinal disease, right? And it's like, we can, when you're a farmer and you have Campylobacter or is sort of present, there's a slow turnaround time, it doesn't keep up with fast food chains. So I was like, okay, can you actually, and this was an element of sort of the synthetic biology side that was sort of coming in while I was studying the biodesign. Can we design a hybrid receptor from another organism that flags this up and glows in the presence, right? Because again, you have one poultry contaminated, or you have to cull the whole flock. It's just huge waste. so what the project was about was actually, okay, can you actually have a low cost biomarker that's outside the lab where you spray it on certain surfaces, and it's milk based engineering.
Of course.
A milk, yeah. L-lactis, a milk based bacteria, yeah, to glow.
I think it's really interesting that, like quite a few biodesign projects, you have to figure out this way to get the bacteria to talk back to you. And one way quite a few people do is to have it glow or light up. Because to actually test like an organism or the presence of bacteria can take a lot of time, research, resources, and money. Whereas if you can have this very simple, if present, like talk back to me with light, it's quite a nice way to tell.
Yeah, and there's this, again, it comes down to that scale thing of like, okay, how do you see what's happening in the sort of micro world? Again, how do you visualize that for the naked eye, right? Like, how do you see that, whether that's in a field or in a field, sort of in a lab setting, to see that change in state? What's that sort of tool that translates that? And I think it'll be really cool to see how that evolves in time as well. How do we step away from sort of GFPs, or not necessarily step away from them, but what are the other sort of tools that can translate those interactions that are happening at a microscopic scale that affect the interactions at our sort of human level.
So GFPs is in like the green fluorescent proteins
Yeah.
that are used as biomarkers to show whatever it is you're looking for. So what is the reason why we need to look for alternatives or kind of broaden the biomarker repertoire?
The biomarkers, I mean, again, sort of, the project was a way of sort of raising these questions around, okay, I mean, technically, you can't just have a genetically engineered biomarker just in a farm without sort of a huge amount of testing, right? So it was a very lab-based, that side of things was very lab-based, but it was built in these farm visits and sort of speaking with farmers and sort of visiting poultry farms and sort of, again, think about, okay, actually, how would a project like this help you? What are the sort of ethical considerations? You are also thinking about, okay, there is this huge, as you guys know, it's sort of there are these sort of the public perception around GMO and engineered organisms is sort of, again, varies, and also ethically, the poultry industry is already really toxic, right? Like, how does a biomarker actually just give free rein to sort of big poultry farmers, right? Like, how, but at the same time, again, how do small and medium-sized farms, poultry farms, keep up with Monsanto or whatever, like big pharma with an F? How do they develop or have biomarkers at a low cost rather than sort of having these huge expensive vet bills? So that's that sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So the biomarker shows the presence of a bacteria in poultry farm contexts to prevent the spread of that bacteria and that disease throughout the entire farm, right?
Yeah, and in our food system as well, and yeah.
And some of the context was this idea in research that suggests that the next pandemic we have is going to be because of our farming systems.
Yeah, I mean, we are creating these perfect, almost like perfect conditions, right? It's almost like this.
We couldn't be making them better.
Yeah, I mean, we've got these huge amount of flocks in these CAFOs, these concentrated animal feeding operations where like everything's warm, all the animals are unfortunately on top of one another, sort of stacked up, and the conditions are pretty horrendous. Like, it's almost weaponizing one day. Yeah, it's only time, right? Like,
it's like a ticking bio-time bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually, like throughout the course of human history and agriculture, how much disease and how many new diseases have appeared because of farming practices and living very close to like farming animals, and how that's kind of changed like human resistance to certain diseases as well. But yeah, I guess it's interesting because your project was kind of coming out just after pandemic.
Yeah, and also, I mean, at the same time, I'd just say around like bovine TB, right? Like, when you had cows in cities, like you'd had those sort of city farms sort of in I don't know, Georgian times, where in these built-up cities, you'd have these cows in really dense areas, and people wouldn't know that why. I mean, they were seen as isolated issues of like people getting TB and cows, right? And not seeing that connection. So at the same time, it provided this context to be like, actually, this is why this is happening, and sort of connecting that animal disease or sort of non-human disease and human disease, right? Like, that crossover there,
So how did you get into synthetic biology as someone that's come from like an interaction design background, and you're just kind of discovering biodesign? Well, not just discovering biodesign, but you're formally studying biodesign. How do you then get into the kind of synthetic biology aspect of it?
The interaction design side, again, I wouldn't say I'm the best interaction designer at all in the slightest, but you sort of, I'd say it's the coding elements that sort of, okay, you're coding these, whether sensors, whatever, like the biological code's already there, it's just in DNA. So almost thinking, there's that almost jump there, and then almost seeing these sort of biological mechanisms as sort of, I think it was quite a nice translation there from an interaction design perspective to a sort of symbio perspective. Again, it's still something I would say that I'm on that journey of learning. I think it's vast, right? But that's that transition.
That's interesting.
Okay, so since graduating, you've done a lot of very interesting things. You've worked in central government around policy, and you've also set up this beautiful space that we're in today, Lifefabs. Tell us a bit about what that journey has been like on both these paths.
So my sort of teaching background and sort of working with local government and co-design with certain communities sort of fed into the more policy, or sort of fed that sort of policy direction. Fortunately, at the time, it was sort of, that role was linked to sort of waste and thinking about circularity and materiality, which was a really nice bridge there. And I think there's a complete disengagement with policy, and both because it's sort of actually, there are a lot of barriers to it, right? So how can you sort of break down those barriers and actually allow people to sort of have a say on that? Alongside that, sort of setting up this lab, we're in the Knowledge Quarter of London, right, where we've got the Crick, the Wellcome, UAL, UCL, British Library, but besides like the odd open day, like no one can access any of these facilities. No one can explore or have that sort of, there are these still barriers in everyday life. And when I sort of set up Lifefabs with Danny, my co-founder, sort of like, okay, how do we break down these barriers around that, and how can we provide a research space for anyone, sort of PhD, MA, BA, anyone, a local resident, to sort of explore STEAM learning or science in a certain way and actually take a project forward and sort of, bring it to life, rather than it becoming, again, something where you walk past every day and you can't actually visit. And I think there's this thing of sort of interdisciplinarity as well, where the paperwork for me to visit another university lab is insane. Right? Like you can't collaborate with another university or another sort of, unless it's sort of officially done through huge amounts of forms and grants. So actually, how can you have a sort of agnostic space that's at the heart of that?
That is very interesting, just thinking about how few spaces you can actually gain access to. Because obviously there's amazing like resources in universities, but it's such a temporary time that you get access to these. Or I have friends who teach, and one of the real draws to teaching is often that you actually just get access to these resources. Whereas there's so much you can do, and also so much you can do quickly if it's a more autonomous space.
For sure. And I think the university system, I been teaching, it's been my sort of 4th year. I think they're awesome places. But there is this element of people come and go and leave, or sort of, if you live around the corner from that, actually, like, you're never going to get exposed to that. So, and there is that, temporary thing of, you graduate, you finish, how do you take something forward? How do you have the space that's accessible to do that? Or how do you have those elements of sharing knowledge, both with local residents and vice versa, actually local residents sharing sort of local contexts or projects that they're developing in that way. Yeah,
it's like, how can you share that knowledge and what you're working on if you actually can't even physically bring a non-student through the door with you?
Yeah, and how do you democratize almost like research grade equipment? Yeah, like every lab, most labs sort of upgrade their equipment sort of quite frequently. What's so nice about Lifefabs is, in a traditional lab, a piece of equipment breaks, you have to get rid of it, right? Because you can't publish a paper or sort of conduct your protocol if, the LED screen has a bit of damage on your -80, right? You get a new one. But as a community lab, actually, there is this sort of hands-on thing where you can have interaction designers, people with a sort of background in whether that's 3D printing or sort of programming. Actually, we can repair these things quite easily, and we can actually sort of, we can actually sort of do that here, and we've been doing that in that way.
So giving a new home to all this unloved equipment, that is like perfectly fine.
Yeah,
but not up to the a perfect standard of.
I mean, I would say a lot of it's pretty perfect.
I think this is one of my favorite waste streams, is like near perfect lab equipment that's just not quite good enough.
Yeah, the LED screen was replaced.
Okay, so to bring things a bit to a close, what is your dream project and why?
Oof.
Maybe you're living your dream right now.
Yeah, maybe, no. I'd love to, different projects. For me, my dream project is actually, right now, would be actually focusing on Lifefabs. And actually, in that way, giving it the space and the space for others to grow in here as researchers, as providing sort of accessible courses that allow, if you've never studied science before, you can actually go off and study. It's sort of almost like a foundation. Cool. You can actually take that forward. And that is something we're developing here. And one-off workshops where, you're studying at university, but, you're not exposed to bacterial cellulose, or your project isn't around fungi. Actually, how can you learn that here and get a sort of well-rounded, sort of holistic learning from one another? And linking up with local schools, which we're already doing, and sort of growing that network of projects.
Do you have any examples of like projects that are going on right now, or people have been using like Lifefabs for? Yeah,
so we've got a few bacterial cellulose based projects. One of the local schools that we're sort of working with is around bioprinting. So they've received a 3D printer that they haven't sort of had one in the school before. So we said we'd sort of support in any way, sort of setting it up, and students will be coming here, and we'll almost like run a mini brief around sort of different recipes that we can do, and then we can actually print some of the materials and designs that the sort of secondary school kids come up with.
That is incredible.
Wow.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to have a bioprinter in secondary school.
Well, yeah. Well, it'll be. Look, what's so cool about Lifefabs is almost not to be like.
We're fans of this space.
Not to like
blow your own trumpet.
Yeah.
But no school has name me a school that has funding or enough funding to like fund a design. Sort of design studio or lab classroom that has all this sort of. So how can you actually have a local hub, right, where there's 15 schools in the local area within actually how can this be sort of, again, that sort of agnostic space where you could do workshops here with schools and where people come to, rather than it being everyone having to fund their own and compete in funding as well. Like, that's crazy for me that like schools have to compete for funding at times. Like,
this makes me think so much of the scholar Zachary Stein's research on sort of futurist meta-modern education, and how, like, if you were actually to redesign education, it would look far more like these intergenerational hubs with different resources, and teachers more like facilitators. And the way you're describing Lifefabs, I'm like, wow, you're actually really starting that, like kicking this off of like building out these almost educational nodes.
definitely. And I think this thing of, and the way that I've sort of been teaching the past sort of 4 years is sort of saying that to students on the courses that I'm on, that sort of lead, is sort of actually, you're going to learn more from your course mates than from me in that way. And actually the same goes to apply of whatever level you're at in sort of STEAM learning or biodesign, you have something to share and bring to the table. It's not like, it's not only people who have done a PhD are able to run workshops, like, or like, of course, right? Actually, it's that if there's everyone has something to contribute in a certain way at any level. Like, it is that mutual learning of one another. Yeah.
But it is incredible, like you're uncovering the value of knowledge at so many levels, but that was already there, but being underused, and combining that with Kirsten's point about creating an educational node in like a local web, within the local community is incredible.
Definitely. And again, it's that grounding in and sort of anchored to both local residents, universities, rather than seeing them as sort of two separate things or being tied to one institution. Yeah, it's almost like a balance there. Yeah.
Oh, this is so interesting. I know, like, I want to find all the little educational nodes in London.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, in that book, the one that's called Biodesign, I think that coined the term biodesign maybe about 10 years ago. It had, like in the appendix, like a list of these kind of like DIY labs in different countries where you could kind of hack biology and learn biodesign. But I think by the time we were on the course, a lot of those places had shut down. Yeah. And it was kind of like, okay, the fear of a design student when they leave university, right? Or they no longer have access to these facilities, what do they do? But here we literally have the solution to that, and it's amazing.
Well, again, like, there are a lot of regulations around what you can order, from whether that's Thermo Fisher or whatever. Like, you have to sort of be a registered lab, which is great, right, for biosecurity and biosafety standards. At the same time, lack of funding, COVID wiped out a lot of labs. And it's good now that we have one in London again in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Where can people follow your journey? Where can people follow Lifefabs?
So Lifefabs' main sort of best way to follow would probably be the Instagram. So that's at Lifefabs. But we've got a website which is lifefabs.bio too. So that would be
Very nice. And to round everything off, we'd like to ask you one final question, which is, to whom
or to what
would you like to dedicate this conversation to?
I thought we were going to go with like a desert island disc like question. Like, what organism would you take to an island with you?
I think we might have to use that one, actually.
That's actually great.
Yeah.
Let's poach that.
Yeah. Thank you, Digby.
Yeah, that's right. Who would I like to dedicate this? Probably a couple of people. So Danny, for setting up this wonderful space with, I mean, everyone that's sort of been part of this journey in different ways, sort of through interaction design, biodesign. I mean, but a lot of people. Yeah.
And your grandma for the milk.
And my grandma for the milk, obviously. Yeah. How could
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'll give her a copy of this and she'll be like, what the hell?